Chapter 6, The Last Fight. Pyper, San Diego. My right hand was gripping the knife tightly because I was terrified to use it. It did not matter that we were in war because nothing could ever justify being in one. The lives of both the rebels and soldiers who had fallen meant a lot to their families. They were not just numbers, not just a speck in this world whose lives did not make any difference to Akea. And that was why I tried not to kill anyone. But I knew that it would be impossible to leave my hands clean after today. Kino was still invisible, and so was everyone else. The cloud that we were riding on touched the ground, and we found ourselves running across the battlefield now, ready to fight, or partake in this war in whatever manner we could. Kino squeezed my hand. I'm going to look for the Emperor. I believe this battle is between the two of us. Something that we needed to settle from the very first moment that I breathed the Akean air, Kino said. I want to go with you, I insisted. The Emperor was skilled in his power because he has been using it all his life. Kino, on the other hand, had only discovered his power 2 moon turns ago, and he had only learned to control it not so long ago as well. I want to be there to protect him. There must be some way that I can help you. If you're beside me, I will worry, and I won't be able to fight as strongly, he said. This time, he had gone visible, and I could see the green in his eyes. They were so refreshing, they could take away all my worries just by looking at them. I was unaware when I began to feel like I needed him in my life, but maybe it was from that very first time that we met, when he had rubbed the ointment on my arm, and I caught a glimpse of his kind soul. All right, but we'll be behind you, watching you, and if there's anything we can do to help, we will rush in to save your sorry ass, I said, trying to squeeze in a smile. He smiled back, and then I was unable to help it. I hugged him tightly and kissed him on the cheek. Kino smiled, and I felt myself blushing furiously, but before I could say anything, bolts of lightning began to strike the land again. We knew it was time to fight. Kino wasted no time and became invisible, and he was gone, riding on a cloud. I could almost see his gooey figure as it soared towards where the cloud seemed to be the darkest. Let's go, I said to the rest of us. Kino may have asked us not to go with him, but we would be there just the same. Quila nodded and started sprinting so fast that it took me by surprise. Goemi and Master Jor were also running after us.
Romeo de Nicholas. Everyone was tired by now, yet we were all fueled by that same desire to finally conclude this war. We knew we could not be taken prisoners by the Empire. I could only see 2 possible outcomes, us winning this war or us dead on the ground. Both outcomes would result in a high death toll on both sides. Lamare rode her bay while Laren and I remained on foot. It was our Niven way, and we will rely on our feet and our invisibility to win this war. I looked at my fellow Nivens. Their faces were grim because they knew as much as I did of this battle's outcome. And even if we somehow miraculously emerged victorious, it would have also meant the death of many fellow Akeans. If you believe in the value of our heritage, in being recognized as citizens once again, then you will fight this war till the very end. This Emperor would stop at nothing to eradicate us. We recently discovered why the Emperor acted the way he did before. The seer had long prophesied that out of the Niven blood, Akea would rise again. The time to make a stand is now. We've almost seen this one through. I paused to catch my breath. The Nivens and rebels were all eager to have this over with, even if it meant their own deaths. Fighting for a cause brings out the courage in everyone. When I say charge, we will take in our hands the lives of anyone who still fights for the Emperor. They raised their arms in the air and shouted, to Niven. That was all that I needed to hear, to know that they were still with us in this fight. I caught Laren's eye. Chief Hunter, if you may. She nodded and then yelled with her right hand pumping the air, charge. It was the most beautiful sound. Mayo, Calo. I had been waiting for this moment for such a long time, to stand by Master Romeo's side and to fight. I used to think that when I fought in a war, it would be beside my father, but things change, and everything is different now. He is gone, but he died bravely, as Dogan narrated. He had killed the great general and king of Amer, Ion Noto, whose name brought fear to anyone who heard it. And now, the chief hunter, Pyper's mother, was screaming charge. I took out my sword from its scabbard and ran like crazy behind Master Romeo. I will protect him. Whoever he does not kill, I will. The air was filled with the loud bursts of the ground exploding as lightning struck the battlefield. The clash of sword against sword clanged above the thunderous explosions. The Nivens vanished into thin air, and so did Master Romeo, and I found myself staring straight at a Kanelan soldier. I raised my sword and swung at him. He fell to the ground as invisible hands grappled at him. I stared at the soldier as he continued writhing. He was struggling profusely, and as he kicked hard, I thought he might have struck a Niven because there was a loud thunk. Before I could change my mind, I thrust the sword at him and finally ended him. Blood spilled on the ground, and I felt chills running up and down my spine. It was surreal. I wanted to be a soldier, but I realized I was not ready for all of this. I wiped the blood that had smudged my face. My hands were sweating profusely so much that I feared the sword I was holding would slip. I wanted to be a soldier, but was I really ready for this? Where were Kino and Pyper? They went to find the Emperor to end this war, but were they able to find him? I hoped with all my heart that this would end soon. Mayo. Somebody shouted from behind. I turned around to see who it was. Professor Leben. I said, surprised but happy to see him here. What are you doing here? I heard that you and Kino were at the center of this fight, he said. So I want to make good use of my power. What good would my power toning classes be if I could not display my power in a war? A most important war, in fact. He was smiling. His face was already streaked with sweat, which meant that he had been fighting too. As usual, he was barefoot because his power was in his legs. Besides, I believe in what you are fighting for. Thank you, Professor. I said. I didn't come alone, he said. I turned around and found my classmates around me. They were also fighting against the soldiers alongside us. I narrowed my eyes to check if what I was seeing was real. Is that Conrad? I said, remembering the bully who had always made school slightly tougher on Kino and me. And there's Lima. I was surprised. I can't believe they're here too. Children fight and bicker. It's a way of life, but it stops there. What's more important is to understand that schoolmates are like brothers. They believe that they're the only ones who can bully their brothers. Nobody else gets to do that. So when they learned that I was going here, they volunteered and even convinced your other classmates to go, Professor Leben said. If there were no fighting going around, I would have hugged the professor, but my eyes might have gone misty because Dogen said all of a sudden, wipe your tears, Mayo. Continue fighting. I sniffed but did exactly what he said. I nodded at Professor Leben and got back to fighting. Dogen moved with such grace that was unexpected of someone with his bulk, but then again, fighting is an art, and perhaps he had mastered it. Beside him, Professor Leben was kicking things towards the soldiers. It was fun to watch him in action, I must say. With Dogen and Professor Leben fighting with me, everything seemed easier. My heart was still pounding as I raised my sword to thrust it at the soldier who had his back on me. He turned around so quickly that I froze, and then before I could swing my sword at him, Dogen had quickly slashed his sword several times. The soldier was dead before he even hit the ground. Follow me, Dogen said. But if you cannot stomach it, go back to the tents. Else, you will just be a distraction. I can do this. I was born to be a soldier. It will take some time to get used to this, but I will be a soldier like my father. That will be his legacy through me. I stepped backward at the right moment and missed the arrow that hit the ground. My face must have paled because I could feel my head getting lighter. I had to compose myself. At this moment, there is no place in my heart for so much fear. I had to defend myself because when Kino takes the throne, I want to be one of his personal allies. Dogen. I yelled. We have to find Kino. He is going to fight the Emperor alone, and I'm sure he'll need our help. We have to get to him quickly. Dogen sidestepped before swinging his sword at the soldier, causing the latter to topple over. Then in one quick motion, Dogen thrust the sword at the soldier's back. Dogen looked up at the sky. The Emperor must be riding the clouds, or he could be anywhere here. We'll get to them, don't you worry. Then right that moment, the ground that Dogan was standing on burst and threw us backward. There was mud all over my body, and beside me, there were other bodies that had been knocked down. Some were flung a few yards from where I was. Dogan? I said, and when there was no response, I repeated loudly, Dogan. There was no reply. Instead, I saw a huge man with bark-like skin lying on the ground. I stood up and rushed to it and was relieved when I saw that it was not Dogan. That won't kill me, Mayo, he said, coming from behind me. But if a lightning bolt struck me directly, I'd be a goner. Come on now. We must find the Emperor. Then without saying another word, he sprinted towards the center of the battlefield to where I presumed the Emperor would be.
Lair in San Diego. Romeo was running ahead of me, and when he joined the battleground, he immediately took to fighting alongside the rebels. The Kanelan soldiers were attacking us from all sides, but we could turn invisible, which has always been an advantage for the Nivens. The problem was that these soldiers, while they could not turn themselves invisible, had other powers. If someone is unlucky enough to get hit by a soldier who had super strength as a power, then that Niven would find himself wounded at the very least. I threw my dagger at one of the soldiers. It pierced him just close to his heart, and he immediately fell to the ground. Then I went over to pull back my blade. No sooner had I touched it did I strike at the neck of the soldier closest to me. It was not deep enough, but the gash cut his veins. He fell to the ground with a loud thunk. I kept on skimming through this war, fighting against Kanelan soldiers while I remained invisible. Romeo kept on flickering in and out of sight, and it was a good tactic to confuse and weaken the morale of the Kanelan soldiers. Once fear consumed them, they could hardly get the chance to fight with a sound mind. And so, Kanelan soldiers fell. But lightning struck the ground again, and this killed Nivens and Kanelan soldiers alike. I searched the battlefield for any trace of my daughter, but she was nowhere to be found. Dear gods, whatever the outcome, please care for my little girl. Emperor Amark. I kept galloping on my bay and shot arrows to prevent the Nivens from getting killed by the Emperor's soldiers. I could not come too close to them, else, I risked being slaughtered easily as well. The Nivens were falling like leaves in autumn because of the lightning. Even if the Kanelan soldiers fell, there were so many of them that the Emperor could just keep on deploying them. As dawn broke, Sysis began her gallant arrival on the horizon. To me, it was a promise of how good this day might end. But it was impossible. 4 of the remaining war generals charged in front of the battlefield, followed by the Emperor's men. They charged on their horses, and the tree runners were running with them. I estimated, with the current situation, that we would all be dead in about an hour. I took arrows and started shooting them in the air again, aiming at those who appeared to be about to thrust their swords into thin air. I hoped that in doing so, I was saving someone's husband or father. Romeo de Nicholas was leading the Nivens on the forefront, but with the Emperor's armies gathering strength by the minute, he would be retreating very soon. If only Kino could end this now. Then to my surprise, I heard cheers from behind me. There were loud galloping sounds coming from the horses that filled the air. When I looked behind me, I saw the animals charging as well. There were prides of tigers and lions moving speedily towards us. And packs of wolves running so swiftly that one could hardly see them. Far back, there were elephants and wild horses. And birds. All kinds of birds, swooping from above and pecking the Kanelan soldiers. When they reached the battlefield, there was a different kind of carnage as men fought against the defenders of the forest. And leading them was Elder Man, who was riding a dark bay. Charge! He yelled, and then there were other guttural sounds that he made as he raised his right arm in the air. By now, he was already at the center of the battlefield with Romeo, and together, they fought side by side against the Kanelan warriors. The generals urged their soldiers to move forward and attack, and they did. Charge! Elder Man shouted, and all was in chaos. Mikibika.
Elder Mandilo. There was nothing else for me to live for, save to see the peace that had once reigned in Akea return to her embrace. The fall of the Emperor is something that I would happily take to my grave. This was it, my last act with my friends. It was hard to convince them because they were not used to meddling with the wars of men, but I told them that this was a sacrifice that we all must make, for everyone, citizens and all creatures alike, so that we could live freely in Akea and that the tree runners, their brothers, could be freed of the taint that has ruined them all these years. I knew what I risked losing with this deed, my time. If a friend of mine dies in this battle, my power will weaken, and so I would lose minutes of my life. Sometimes it could be hours, at most days. But with the number of my friends fighting with me today, I was assured of sudden death. Romeo was dancing the moon steps as he fought against the Kanelan warriors. He was graceful as he danced, and yet, every time he landed on his feet, 2 Kanelan soldiers fell lifeless on the ground. It was an honor to fight alongside him. For every strike that we unleashed upon the Emperor's soldiers, they fell a step or 2 behind, and we marched forward, closer to the Kanelan gates. The elephants that came along with us, slow as they were, trampled against the soldiers and knocked the gates down. All sizes of birds hovered above us and swooped down against soldiers as another form of distraction. The lightning caught several of them, and I felt electricity running through my body. I shriveled in pain, but I could not stop now. Fight! I yelled. Atare Nilata. I shouted in their natural language, beckoning my friends to keep pushing forward. We will win this war. We must win this war. The heavens darkened, and at that moment, even Sisis was nowhere to be found. The moons that usually brought some light onto the horizon could not be seen as well. It was a darkness that we had never known before. Then lightning streaks covered the sky. I touched the sword that was strapped to my waist. It still felt foreign to me. And then, I unsheathed it and raised my hand. Charge! For Nivedon! For freedom! For honor! Romeo shouted. The Nivens and the other rebels chanted his words in unison. They kept pushing forward, and it seemed as though we might actually win this war. McQuinstorm Aaron. We were winning, and then all of a sudden, we lost the advantage of having more men and having the tree runners by our side. Men and animals joined forces to fight my armies. It was preposterous to watch. There was nothing inside my chest but hatred, and I could feel myself growing even stronger in my power. The sky was so dark now, and it looked pleasing when I made the lightning flash against the sullen, ashen sky. When I was hurling down lightning to kill all of those who opposed me, everything seemed like a work of art. I'm here. I heard a boy's voice in the distance. Kino Amark. Even if I had not talked to him, I knew that it could only be him who would have the courage to approach me. There was no need to search for him because he was already right in front of me. To my surprise, he was riding a cloud similar to the time when he escaped me in Karasthea. This has only been the 3rd time I've laid my eyes on him. He had grown. He seemed taller, leaner, and his hair had grown out. There was something different about him, a certain level of confidence in him that I did not hint at in the past. Perhaps it came with knowing that he has power. We meet again, boy, I said. I see you've come to die. Why? He started asking. Silly boy. Why did you need to do all those bad things when it was you who took my mother's power? When it was you who wronged us? When it was you who bound my power for such a long time? Lightning flashed in the sky, and for a moment, his face was illuminated. His green eyes flashed, and I was reminded of Lamare and her betrayal. I would have loved you if you were my son, but you are a constant reminder that I have not truly conquered Lamare. I would have raised you as my son had your eyes not been that hateful shade. You are a beacon of my failure, of your mother's treacherous deeds. You have no place in Akea. I should have killed you when I first saw you, but I let you live. How many moon turns had it been? 15. Yes, I believe you are now 15. I gave you enough moon turns to know about life, but now I must end it. What if there's another way? Kino yelled from across the sky. What other way are you talking about? The prophecy said that out of the Niven blood, Akea would rise again. It couldn't have been any clearer. Those rebels down there with those cratty Nivens, if I don't eradicate them, one of them will take the Empire away from me. And you must die in this war as well. I want both of us to live. You have wronged us and done many bad deeds, but those don't make you a bad person. Perhaps just not the good Emperor Akea deserves, he said. I felt my blood boil in rage. Was he, a mere lad, to lecture me about leadership? I am the Emperor. I fed anger to my chest, and as I did, I conjured a big wave of air around me. I hurled it at the boy, who flew back and staggered, but he was quick on his feet, and immediately, the cloud that he was riding on glided. Why do you have that power? Wasn't Distantecus enough? I shouted in rage. Distantecus isn't my power. It's shuffling, he said matter-of-factly as though jesting me of my ignorance of what shuffling was. I was stunned into silence. Shuffling was an old power that had materialized only twice in this age. It could copy the powers of anyone in Akea, and those endowed with such a gift could shuffle among the powers that they copied. But I thought of how silly it was for this boy to have copied my power. Insolent boy. I concentrated and gathered a big wave of air, making it swirl big enough to become a whirlwind. I aimed it at the boy, and I did not fail. He seemed to have lost his footing for a split second, but then he was back on his feet again and maneuvering the cloud that he was riding on. I swooped down and started chasing after him, throwing lightning bolts one after the other, all of which he was able to avoid. At one point, he stopped at his tracks, skidded to the left, and I chuckled as I hurled another lightning at him, but this time, he flew higher and then turned around to face me. Before I knew it, he was throwing lightning at me. I dodged his lightning bolts, but I was surprised at how quickly he had learned to master my power. It was not right for the gods to allow someone to possess a power that was more powerful than what was given me, I told myself. Hatred singed at my core, and it was burning me all over. I redirected a whirlwind at him. This time, I hit him directly. The air and everything else it gathered from across the battlefield engulfed the boy. I started to laugh, such an easy win. The prophecy will never come true. All Nivens would be annihilated by the end of the day, and the boy will die with them. The spawn that Lamari brought to our lives will soon be gone, and so Micromanya's prophecy will dissipate. In his grave, Northsam will see that Akea is in much better hands with me on its helm as the Emperor. There was no sign of the boy anymore. I stopped the whirlwind, and the boy was thrown away. I rushed in to chase after him for the kill. Kino Amark. I could not stop myself from screaming as I was engulfed by a mix of air and rubbles and whatever was swallowing me whole. I tried to control it, to counter it, but the wind was moving too fast, and there were many other things that were hitting me. I tried to use lightning to get back at the Emperor, but it was a wrong power to use because it only got mixed with the whirlwind as well. With all my remaining strength, I pushed myself out of the tornado. But just when I thought that I was about to escape it, the giant column of air stopped whirling, and because of the force of my power, I was hurled away. I flung, screaming as a cold wind engulfed me. I fell at rapid speed. I suddenly remembered when I used to try flying with fake wings, which Mayo and I crafted just because I wanted to have power. But I have special abilities now. I do. And it came back to me, the intense desire to be one with my power. I concentrated hard for a cloud to form, but I was unable to make one materialize. I felt so weak. But the battle isn't over yet. You can do this, Kino. I had hardly fought the Emperor. Not even weaken him. Nonetheless, hope burst from inside me, and at that moment, when I conjured a cloud, it formed. I stood on it and glided across the sky once again. The Emperor shot lightning at me, but I deflected it and threw the lightning back at him. By now, he was flanking me. Run, boy. Go back to your mother and hide, he said menacingly. His eyes were shiny and silvery as he stared at me. This close, I could sense the power that he emanated. I skidded to the left and took a sharp turn, going in the opposite direction to avoid him, but he immediately caught up with me. Do you think that you can master storm crafting overnight when it took me years to perfect it? "You're not going to be that good so quickly, boy," he sneered. Then he hit me with hail, and I screamed as my body bruised all over. I threw lightning at him as I yelled. But each lightning that I hurled was avoided gracefully by the Emperor as if he was toying with me. I made myself invisible so that I could avoid him and went in the opposite direction again before making another attempt at striking him with lightning. The Emperor was glowing, and there was an aura of bright red light surrounding him. Wherever he went, it scorched his tracks as though he was the source of power itself. Here on the horizon, it seemed like it was impossible to defeat him. He had mastered this power, and I was only a novice. Without my friends, I may not be able to beat him. I have to make use of the power where I know I am far stronger than he was, the power of friendship. With this realization, I swooped down, hurriedly scanning the ground for my friends, Pyper, Mayo, Calo, and Goemi. They would all be able to help me. Someone on the ground stood up as his bulk attacked Kanelan soldiers. He parried with the soldiers, and after killing 2 of them, the third one he tied up in vines that he sprung from the ground using his power. It was Dogan. Not far from him, Mayo was also fighting with the soldiers. A soldier threw a spear towards Mayo, but I managed to block it with my cloud and kicked at it. Then I landed on the ground right beside Mayo. "Gee, thanks," he said, surprised. "Did you kill him?" He was referring to the Emperor. "Not yet. I need your help," I said. "I can't kill him alone." As I said this, I kept hurling lightning at the enemies, but I knew the lightning that I crafted was smaller and less powerful than what the Emperor created. It stunned those that it hit, but it was not powerful enough to make the ground burst from underneath the soldiers. Dogan was still parrying. All around us, the animals were also charging. My eyes searched everywhere for Pyper and the others, but they were nowhere in sight. "Then let's go together and take him down," Mayo said bravely as though there was not an ounce of fear in him. I nodded. I ran alongside him as I reached out to touch his hand so that he would become invisible. We went on searching the grounds for our friends. I saw Goemi first. She was crouching behind some dead bodies, and she had her hands on someone else's chest. The soldier jerked under her hands and immediately leapt up, dazed and confused at what had happened. It occurred to me what she had done: she was reviving him. And if that was what Goemi was doing, then it only meant one thing, that Miroe was here. "Do you think you're fast enough, Bubba?" Miroe shouted. I turned around, and there he was. "If you kill 10, it matters to me that I can at least revive half of them," Goemi answered. Miroe was standing proudly. He had changed since I last saw him. He did not look special anymore, and well, he could talk. I struck lightning towards him, but he was able to avoid it by rolling on the ground and quickly standing up where he landed. His attention was now on me. "The Emperor values you most of all, Kino," he said. "It seems odd that everyone I care about puts you on a pedestal." Then he laughed. He leapt in the air and extended his hand as though to touch me. While he was in midair, I felt my heart constrict as though someone was gripping it tightly. "No!" Mayo shouted. Then he hit Miroe on the back of his head. But that was not enough to make him unconscious. It did buy me some time, though, to turn invisible quickly and go to where Goemi was. I was panting when I reached her, and I clutched at my chest. "Show me how it's done," I told Goemi. She quickly nodded and went to another fallen Niven. I could feel her power as she unraveled the strings that bound the fallen Niven's heart. Then she cut it, and his heart was then loose. The Niven gulped for air as he was revived. "I can do it now," I said. "I will help." Then we went to the fallen Nivens as Mayo fought with the soldiers. Miroe, on the other hand, was laughing maniacally as he squeezed the hearts of the rebels and Nivens, each of them falling hard on the ground. I could not keep on healing them, I thought. Instead, I needed to strike at Miroe so that he would stop. I turned invisible and leapt towards him and urged the vines to grow from the ground. Immediately, thick vines spouted and crawled towards Miroe. They wrapped around his legs. Miroe slashed wildly at the vines to free himself, but he was not fast enough. Moments later, He was bound up to his waist. Pyper was by my side by then. "You have to let him go," she said. "He's killing the Nivens," I said. Goemi came running towards us. She was eyeing Miroe like she loathed him, and yet, I could see her concern still flowing from her to her twin. She looked around and froze as her gaze fell upon Master Jor, who was running towards us. He leapt towards Miroe and, in one quick motion, slashed at the vines that were binding Miroe. "Stand up," Master Jor ordered. Kino Amark. Miroe's face twisted as he stared with burning rage at Goemi that I could only surmise that he was trying to squish his twin's heart. For some reason, nothing happened to Goemi. Then he stopped short as he gazed at Master Jor. "Father?" he said, confusion clouding his voice. "It is me," Master Jor replied. "It is good to see you, my son. I had wronged you when I abandoned you and your sister, but it is for this reason that I am here now." Miroe's eyes narrowed. What kind of father deserts his children? He spat out. "Did you know the hardship that Goemi and I had to overcome? We ate mud." Master Jor appeared shaken, and he was not able to give a response immediately. It was the most difficult decision I had to make. Suddenly, there was a deafening sound as lightning struck the ground we were standing on. I flew high in the air as I was thrown back with my friends. "This is not the time for a hearty reunion," a cold voice said. I knew it was the Emperor even before I saw him. He was standing right in front of me, still glowing radiantly from his lightning aura. He was the picture of power. "Miroe, kill the rest, but leave Kino to me," he said as he hopped off his cloud. He started walking towards us. Everything was happening so fast, but it was as though I was seeing it in slow motion. Quila rose, hands in the air, swinging ardent sword at the Emperor. The Emperor laughed and threw Quila away with just a gust of wind. She lay on the ground unconscious. Miroe rushed beside the Emperor. I stood up, although my knees were shaking from the impact. "I have to fight now." "Prove your loyalty to me, Miroe. Kill the old man first," the Emperor ordered. At that moment, Master Jor stood up and faced the Emperor, holding his sword in his right hand as though he was ready to fight. "I will gladly do that," Miroe said in a low tone and walked arrogantly towards Master Jor. "No!" I yelled. Miroe was already just a few yards away from Master Jor. He extended his hand as though he was twisting his heart. "This is for all the pain you caused me. Goemi may have forgiven you, but she had always been the good one." "I'm not so forgiving," he said slyly. Goemi was crying now. She walked beside Master Jor and held his free hand. "If you kill him, I will revive him, and then I will see to it that you will kill no one else," she said. "And you think you can win against me, Bubba?" he said, raising his hands towards Master Jor. McQuinstorm Aaron. I wanted to end the war that very moment, but I was not prepared to meet the man whom I thought to be long dead. "Papa?" I said, never really taking my eyes off the old man in front of me. All eyes swiveled to me as though I had uttered something so vile. "Wind," Gorio McCarran said. "It is me." He did not sound surprised at our encounter as though this was not by chance. I wanted to burst into tears upon hearing him call my name. This man had deserted me, had given me away to the Kanelan soldiers when my only fault was that I went to Amer to take Mama back to Minoan. This man, whom I had always dreamed of rescuing me from my days in the palace dungeons, was standing before me now and revealing to me his true identity. How could I ravage thousands of men if the person I had always wanted to please was here to pass judgment on me? "Why are you here? Do you come for a reunion? To support me, finally? To honor me for what I have become?" I asked. I did not realize that my voice had gone soft as though I was about to cry. This was not what I had hoped for, not planned for, and yet, this was an unexpectedly sad but good surprise. "I have forgiven you for what you did to your mother in the past, but for sending her to Caristhea, that is something that I would never forgive. Your own mother, the person who until now still holds my heart, suffered from your own mischievous ways. If you think that I am here because of you, you are wrong. I came here because while I had doted on you while you were growing up, I had abandoned my other son because he reminded me so much of you. For that, I will forever be guilty. And so Miroe had thought that I didn't love him. It was too late for me to tell him and to change my ways. To show him that I have always loved him, my father said. Each word that he said burned a hole in my heart. All this time, I had thought he had forgiven me, that somehow I had made him proud, and yet, I was wrong. I was burning with rage at his words, and so I strangled him with air and lifted him up. My face twisted in fury as I stared right into his eyes. You will regret everything you just said, old man. I yelled. Mother left us. I thought I could forgive her, but she lied and betrayed me. And yet you still side with her? My voice was shaking with rage. Papa was struggling from the invisible bind that held him. Release me, he said, struggling in between breaths. Or if you must, kill me. I can never be proud of you. You murdered your own mother. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. For a while, I loosened my hold on his neck so that he could speak because whatever he had to say, I felt compelled to listen. For my sanity. So that I could learn the truth about my mother. She left me because she loved you more, Papa said. Her power was dreaming. She talked to the Mima many times, and in her dreams, it was revealed to her that the only way that you would earn greatness was if she left you behind. I was a fool to think that you would ever achieve greatness, he said, choking. He laughed weakly. You will never measure up to the courage of your mother. She left me because she was more concerned about your destiny, and you repaid it by flooding a mare. I was shaking. How could this be? Did Marcella Benilde tell me the truth? I had not believed her then. But Papa was telling all of this to me now. Did I kill the only person who ever truly loved me? Lies. All lies. Liar. I shouted. Rage filled my chest once again. I tightened the air around Papa, and he choked. His eyes bulged as he kept on struggling. Miroe Pasap. Brother? Was the Emperor my brother? I felt a coldness inside me. Why does this feel so wrong all of a sudden? This man that he had been strangling, my father, was also his father? I glanced at Goemi, and her eyes were bulging in disbelief. She let out a sound as she watched Papa choke. Stop it! I said. Then I raised my hand to squeeze the Emperor's heart. But he was faster than I was. He had slammed me hard with a gust of wind, and I rolled onto the ground. Goemi ran to my side. Quila was beginning to regain consciousness, and as she stood up, she searched for Arden's sword. When she found it, she took it and ran towards the Emperor to strike at him. But the Emperor was quick to respond. He threw her back, and this time, when Quila fell to the ground, the Emperor struck a lightning bolt over her. Goemi let out a yelp. Blood covered Quila where it was not charred. Goemi was trembling, and I put my arms around her, trying to console her. Don't be scared. He's your brother too. He won't hurt you. But then I did what I knew I had to do. I ran towards him and focused only on one thing, to squeeze his heart. To kill the Emperor. The one whom I had vowed to protect. He is killing our father, and while I thought father had not loved me, these past minutes just revealed to me his true feelings and the reason he was here, to save me from my own brother. To save me from sharing the same fate as the Emperor. I stopped just a few yards away from the Emperor and gestured to squeeze his heart. I could already feel his beating hard as the Emperor's eyes bulged. I thought I was winning until I felt something strike at my own heart. And then there she was, Lady Sol. She was serene as she countered what I had been doing to the Emperor's heart. Death is the punishment for betrayal, she uttered. There was sadness in her eyes as though she regretted what she was about to do. And then I felt my heart constrict. I fell to the ground, eyes fixed now on my father. Did I save him? He was still suspended in the air. But did I save him? Was this the last time I would see him? And yet, I could not help but smile because I had just learned that my father had loved me all along.
Pyper, San Diego. Quila's gone, I said as I bent over her. Kino, Quila's gone. I was trembling as I stared at her half-burned body. The Emperor continued to strangle Master Jor. And then, when he had stopped moving, the Emperor let go of his lifeless body, which fell on the ground. Kino's face looked hard, willing to fight the Emperor, but he looked torn as well. Then he raised his hand and threw lightning at the Emperor. "It's me you want," he shouted. "Stop killing innocent people." The Emperor turned to face Kino. "Do you think they're innocent? They kill not only the bodies, but they do much worse. They kill a person's soul. And do you know what happens after that?" He paused, his voice low. "When a person loses his soul, it becomes hard to think about what's right and wrong anymore. And when there's power and authority just right at your fingertips, one becomes almost undefeatable. Like me. I am undefeatable. And you puny little boy will not take the empire from me." He slammed a wall of air at Kino, which sent him flying backward. Kino winced almost like that of a pained animal when he rose from the ground. I pitied Kino, but there had to be something that I could do. I looked at the sword that lay beside Quila. I turned invisible, leapt towards it, and grabbed it with both hands. I was running towards the Emperor, and when I was close enough, I struck him really hard. But he was moving so quickly that I barely grazed the side of his left arm. Then he pushed air all around him, and I was caught and thrown backward. My body fell to the ground with the sword landing just right beside me. I had become visible. The Emperor strode towards me, his eyes staring right into my soul. "You're a ghost. You're a Niven," he said. "None of your kind will ever pose a threat to me anymore." Then he raised his hand to call out lightning, and there was nothing left for me to do but scream.
Kino Amark. I was not prepared for this. I thought I was. I thought about all the days that I had spent with Grandpa, training to fight the Emperor. But I was wrong. I could not even conjure anything now. I was staring at Pyper as the Emperor lifted his hand and watched what he was about to do. At that moment, I knew that I would not be able to take it if he killed her. If I lost Pyper. I remembered General Ion Noto's power, so I shuffled. Then I remembered the power of the boy in the Lundu marketplace, the one who could run so fast. I shuffled and used this power to race toward the Emperor, grabbing the sword that was lying near Pyper's body as I did. I leapt at him and swung, with all the strength that General Ion Noto had, at the Emperor's neck. The blade of the ruby-gilded sword cut cleanly through the Emperor's neck. His head rolled several yards away. I was panting hard. I saved Pyper. I saved her. There was no lightning that had struck her. Or was there? Had I been fast enough? The Lady Solarin Dougras let out a piercing cry. Then she began fighting against us. By now Dogan was already with us, and so he fought with her and the Emperor's men. Mayo was fighting the soldiers side by side with Dogan. He had become a fearless soldier. How he has grown. General Calo would be proud. But none of these mattered to me, there was only Pyper. Will she be all right? Goemi was crying. She went from Miroe to Master Jor's body. And at some point, I believe she also went to the Emperor's body. He was her half-brother, after all. There was still some fighting not so far from where we were. But with the Emperor gone, we knew we could win this war. The group of animals and the horde were coming in, driving away the Emperor's soldiers. If the news of the Emperor's death would spread, the war would definitely end. I grabbed Pyper's body to take her to safety. But I couldn't leave Goemi behind. "We're leaving?" I said. Goemi shook her head. "This is my place. I will mourn them here." Somehow, I understood. I will be back for you, but for now, I must bring Pyper to her mother. With that, I clutched Pyper close to my chest just like that time when she was bitten by a serpetus, and I thought that she was about to die. This time, everything was within my control. This time, I will be able to save her. And with that thought, I conjured a cloud and flew towards our camps. Elder Mayandilo. As Sisis fully rose on the horizon, my friends had dominated the battlefield. I felt weak, and I was afraid that my time in this world would come to pass. I have served my motherland. I have fared well. There was no sign of lightning anymore, no more rumbling battleground. I could only wish that we had won this war. And then I heard it, the words that I wanted to hear all this time. The Emperor is dead. It echoed several times across the battlefield, like a chant of olden lore, but now had taken a new form. It became a victorious chant for the rebellion. The Kanelan soldiers retreated, and the rebels and the Nivens pushed forward, emboldened by the courage brought about by the Emperor's demise. I smiled despite the pain that I was feeling and soon fell to the ground. There, just right in front of me, was a dead lion. It will take its toll on me. I gasped for breath as pain seared all over my body. The death of my friends, whom I asked to join the battle, will steal minutes, hours, or even days from my life. I grunted. There is no regret. Today, I could truly die in peace. Elder Mayan, I heard a voice say. I looked up to see Lamare Amark's face. She was still as beautiful even after seeing days of the war. It was such a surprise for me to find that her hair had hardly been disheveled. She stood regally before me like the real princess and heir to the throne that she was. It is done, I said. Lamare crouched down and tried to pull me up, but I just could not stand any more. It seemed as though my legs had forgotten how to stand. No, I said. This is my last farewell. No. Don't say that. We have a healer with us. A Mayo will see to your condition, Lamare said. I gazed upon her eyes and found them filled with so much concern. I squeezed her hand. It's all right. I'm old. I will die fighting for what I believe in. That has always been my purpose. I gave her a weak smile, and then I remembered. The sword, I said. Stop talking. The healer will be here soon, she said. I shook my head weakly. Give it to Mayo. The lad wants to be a soldier. It is only right that when he becomes one, he will wield the sword of one of the finest generals Akea has ever seen. Time was passing quickly, and I feared I would be breathing my last any time soon. I winced as pain covered my body. It was such an effort not to scream, but I was not able to stop the tears from falling. I opened my eyes and stared at Lamare. It is his father's, I said. Lamare held me in her arms, and her tears dropped on my face. She looked regal to me, almost angelic. I looked up at the blue sky that was welcoming me already. I winced as pain tore at my chest. I uttered several words, words that only my friends could understand, to thank them for their service and to bid them goodbye. As I closed my eyes, I could still hear the birds chirp in unison, singing to me to fly with them. The wolves howled, the elephants trumpeted, the lions roared. All of them were bidding me farewell. Dogan Rhonda. She had been Lady Saul, and as she lay on the ground, I made sure that her body was close to the Emperor's. They were not my favorite people in Akea, but it was my honor to make sure that I put them side by side. It was a form of respect that I wanted to offer them. A kindness that I wanted to bestow upon them. Mayo was beside me, stunned in silence. Hey, kiddo. Do you still want to become a soldier? I asked him, smiling even though my heart was heavy. I was hurting all over, and my left knee was searing in pain. Mayo looked at me, his dark eyes shining, but there were questions in them. Aren't I already? He said. My smile grew wider. That you are, my lad. That you most definitely are. There was a loud barking of dogs everywhere. But one, in particular, grew louder and louder. And when I turned around, there was a brown mutt running to us. Mayo turned in time to see it. Brew! He yelled as he ran to meet it. When they met, Mayo hugged the dog tightly. The dog kept wagging its tail and licking Mayo's face. "What are you doing here? Did you fight with us? Wow, you're a soldier too." He was laughing so hard now. I didn't understand why he was so happy. "I needed to take him with me so that I could find you," someone said. It was an old woman walking towards Mayo. "Suda!" Mayo shouted. He ran towards her, and they embraced tightly. "I am here so I can scold you. What kind of adventure did you get yourself into?" she said in a light tone, messing Mayo's hair. "A really great one," Mayo replied. Then he broke into tears. "Papa's gone. He was killed by one of the generals. Mama's gone too." Suda wrapped her arms around Mayo. "Hush now, boy," she said. "You have me. You will never be rid of me. This war may be over, but it has taken many lives with it. It will be a war that will go down in history as the day Akea was liberated from its greatest usurper. Everyone's got somebody. Even when Mayo lost his parents, he still had Suda, and well, Brew. Somehow, I felt sad. There's no one for me." I looked around me, hoping to find Lamare, remembering her to be the princess I once fancied. But that was all in the past. "Are you hurt?" somebody asked, touching me lightly by my arm. And then I turned around and blushed. Amaya was standing before me, and she was with Mathis. I shook my head. "I have a few wounds, but that's all," I said, lying about the pain on my left knee. I didn't know what else to say. I have always been tongue-tied when in the midst of beautiful women. I blame it on this monstrous face that I have. Mathis threw his arms around my leg. "You're safe. I told everyone in the camp that you defeated the Emperor," Mathis said. I bent down and tousled his hair. "It wasn't me," I said. "It was Kino." He frowned and looked disappointed. "But did you help defeat the Emperor?" he asked. I smiled. "That I did," I said. "Then you're still my hero," Mathis said and hugged me again. I carried him and stood up. "Let's go back to camp. Everything will settle now," I told Amaya. She smiled, and I blushed again. Cratty Habub's ass. I couldn't believe that I had killed so many soldiers, yet when a lady smiled at me, I blushed like an idiot. Amaya held my hand, and I stiffened, but at the same time, I felt so light as we walked toward the camp. This was truly the beginning of a beautiful day. Kino Amark. I wanted to bring Pyper to the camp so that her mother would not worry, but then my mother would also be there and would want to know everything that happened. So instead of bringing Pyper there immediately, I flew farther off and chose a tree whose branches were thick enough to support us. We sat on a branch, and I arranged Pyper's body, clutching her face tightly to my chest. I made both of us visible now because I wanted to see her face. Hers was gray, not because she is sick, but because it had become her natural color from making herself invisible most of the time. And yet, regardless of color, I could not stop looking at her face. She had long lashes. Her nose was small and thin, and her lips were pink. I would never get tired of looking at her face. She was there for me when I was pursued by the Emperor, and she was here as I battled against him. We will always fight together. And we will always stay together. I breathed in and embraced her tighter. Tomorrow is going to be different. The Nivens, our clan, our people, will finally be recognized as citizens of Akea again, and Nivadan as a province again, now that the Emperor is dead. Does that mean I am the new Emperor of Akea? I dismissed the thought. For now, I was content to stay here, in our own space in Akea, with nothing to worry about. Just the two of us. "Pyper," I whispered. She was breathing softly, and that was how I knew she was just knocked off. I watched her sleep as the sun rose higher on the horizon. Out there on the battlefield, I could see all the dead bodies that lay cluttered. It was a ghastly sight, and yet, we have achieved what we came here to fight for. When my arms started to numb from holding Pyper, I shook her a little and said louder this time, "Pyper." Her eyelids fluttered, and then she opened her eyes. Her gaze fell on me as though she was uncertain where she was. And then a smile followed, lighting up her face. "Must I call you Your Grace now?" she said jokingly. I laughed, relieved that she was finally back with me.